alaikum everyone. Hope you're all doing great. This is Roshane, Chapter Director, Starter Grind Sialkot. I hope you all are doing well and keeping safe, especially from the fourth wave of COVID-19. To be honest, my team and I, we actually really miss conducting physical events. We miss the vibe and networking that we used to have. However, the upside of having virtual events, apart from having global audience, is also having access to speakers all around the globe. And especially today, we are extremely honored to have Mr. Khurram Zafar with us. A little introduction about him. He is the founder of 47 Ventures, a Pakistan-focused VC fund. Through his role at Plan 9, LUMS Center for Entrepreneurship, and National Incubation Centers, he has been he has been heavily involved in shaping the Pakistani entrepreneurial ecosystem. Mr. Khurram is also the director at Karandaaz Pakistan, an investment committee member of Insider Impact Asia Fund, and one of the 11 private sector members of Pakistan's Prime Minister's Task Force on Knowledge Economy. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Khurram. It's amazing to have you. Hope you're doing well.
Walaikum assalam, Roshane and Abir. Yes, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. And thank you for that
Although
generous introduction.
I have although introduced you a little, but if there's anything that you would like to add about yourself, which I might have missed, or anything that you would just like to add on, please go ahead.
No, this is perfect, Roshane. If I start talking about everything else that I'm doing, we'll probably need an hour just discussing that.
I'm
So
sure
this
we
is
will.
probably the most relevant stuff.
All right, great. So today we are going to be focused, as our the name of our event suggests as well, where we will be looking into the world of VC venture capitalists, right? So your company, 47 Ventures, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that, and also the few startups that you've helped, and also their success stories, please.
Yeah, sure. So 47 Ventures came about a little over 4 years ago. Um, as you mentioned in my introduction, I was primarily involved with various incubation, acceleration initiatives, or at a high level, just evangelizing entrepreneurship in the country, uh, which started back in 2012. So by 2016 or so time frame, one of the things I realized was that we have corrupted enough minds to start considering entrepreneurship as an alternative career choice, as opposed to landing a job at a multinational company as kids were graduating or professionals were thinking of changing their job from one to another. But what was lacking in the ecosystem was that there wasn't sufficient risk capital available, or if it wasn't available at the right terms that will ensure that the founders will continue to have a vested interest in the company and continue to grow it with the same passion and zeal that they founded the company with. So at that time, I thought probably the next step in developing the ecosystem is to put together a venture capital fund, especially an early stage fund that scouts promising entrepreneurs and startups with high growth potential and provides them seed capital to grow. So went to US, rounded up $10 million, which I thought at that time would be sufficient for an early stage fund. And came back, set up the fund. Took about a year to do that. That's a long story, but started deploying the capital about I think 2017, if I'm not mistaken, 2017 beginning, I believe. So far, we invested in 7 companies, and they are primarily technology companies. Most of them catering to either digitally connected consumers or businesses, and almost all of them have a potential to not just tap into the Pakistani market, but also the region and global. In terms of success stories, it's very early to tell. We keep the ecosystem to start celebrating investments and funding rounds, which is great for the ecosystem. It creates a certain buzz and attracts a lot of attention to it, which is wonderful. But I think the true measure of success as an investor for me and my investors is when the capital that we've invested in a company has seen an exit, which means that the company was either sold or it went and got listed on a stock exchange, so that the shareholders and the shares that we had obtained after investing in the company, they could be sold and the money can be returned, or several times the money can be returned to the investors. That's a real success. So we don't have we're too early, too young a fund, even though we were the first one in Pakistan, international fund in Pakistan, that has started the VC investments. I think it'll still take 2 to 3 years, at least at the minimum, to see an exit. We might have an early exit, but generally it takes 6 to 8 years
Could you
to
please
start
explain,
seeing
because a lot
exits.
of people, sorry for cutting you, but a lot of people don't understand the exit that you just mentioned. So I would really like to for our early startups to understand that as well. So please explain a little bit on that.
Yeah, sorry about that. So exit for an investor or any shareholder in a company essentially means that when you invest money in a business, you give the business the money to spend on its expenses, and what you get in return, unlike debt, which gives you the right to take that money back with interest. In the case of equity investments, you get shares in the company, right? You become a partner in the company. So let's say 10%, 20%, 30% partner in a company. Now your investment, the money that you gave to the company is locked, it's spent by the company, right? And company then hopefully would grow, continue to raise more money if needed, but then eventually become hopefully profitable. And then either somebody will come and say, okay, I'll acquire the company, I'll buy it because it's strategic to me. Or the company board would decide that, okay, let's list this company on the public, on the stock exchange, which means that not only institutional funds or high net worth individuals can invest in this company, but anybody in the country who has even, let's say, 100 rupees to invest can potentially buy a share in the company. That's called IPO. And
Right.
when a company goes IPO, then the shares are publicly traded. Before that, there's a restriction on buying and selling the shares. So when anybody talks about an exit, it generally means a way for the investor or the shareholder in the company to get money back in exchange for the shares that he or she is holding. That's essentially an exit. So typical forms are either somebody will come and acquire you, and pay all the shareholders according to their shareholding and buy the company and management control in the company. Or you go IPO, you list it on the stock exchange, and everybody in the country can essentially buy your shares, and then you can trade your shares on the exchange and put to other people. These are the two predominant forms, and there are other ways of doing exits. There are put options where investors generally sell their shares to the company or the founders or some other investors. There's secondary markets that are created in US, for example, where you could trade your shares. That's what I meant by next.
Right. All right. So my next question is, how can startups raise investment?
To uh, make themselves investable in order to be able to raise money. Um, and by that, I mean that it's not enough to have a startup. It's not enough to just have a good idea. It's not enough to have even a business model. You have to take some steps and demonstrate to people who are entrusting you with their money that you can actually multiply that money and you can grow the company, right? So there are multiple ingredients to that. So first, once you're investment ready, and that's something that we can discuss later, you start approaching investors. You put yourself out there, and you let the community know that you're looking for money, how much money you're looking for typically, and that's generally conventional wisdom says about 18 months of capital required in the company, and then you use that money, grow it for 18 months, and then you go and raise another round if you need further capital. That's why in the startup world, you must have heard of things. Unlike a lot of these industrial businesses where all the investment happens up front. In the case of startups, generally investments happen in multiple tranches or series. And the reason for that is there's disproportionate jump in value of a company as it's growing, even in a matter of months. Look at example of Airlift or Bazaar, for example, that raised money in a span of a couple of years. Their value has jumped a lot, from zero to hundreds of millions of dollars. Means that you want to delay raising money as much as possible, so that when you do need to raise the money, you do it at a higher value and you have to give up less shares in the company. So you basically let the investors know there are various networks, there are incubators, accelerators, there are now VC networks, there are angel syndicates that are out there now. You need to make yourself available. You need to be at the events. There's Karachi hosts a good event. 021 Disrupt, Jumpstart is a great platform. Then this community called PSX, Park Launch. Park Launch is hosting an event next month. So you need to be at these events and network with people, other company founders and investors, so that you can communicate to them and you can reach them and share your pitch. The next thing you need is something to pitch to the investor once you've identified one. And generally you have multiple things prepared for that. One is an elevator pitch, which is a quick 30, 40, 50-second introduction to the company and the business and what you've accomplished so far and what is it that you're looking for. And once somebody shows interest, you send them a pitch deck or an investor brief, which contains slightly more details about the business. And once there's further interest, and you start negotiating the terms on which the investment will be raised, and finally you raise the investment, you sign the shareholders agreement, a share subscription agreement, assuming you have a bank account. Once that is done, the investor puts the money in the bank account and you issue the shares to the investor in exchange for that. So that's typically a process. Generally, I recommend companies that they allow themselves 3 to 6 months to do that. It's not easy or straightforward to raise money, especially in a market like Pakistan. So you want to make sure that you give yourself sufficient runway. You don't look for investment when you run out of money. You start looking for it when you have at least 6 to 8 months of capital left in the company.
Right.
And then there's post-investment formalities that a good lawyer would guide you for that.
All right. So my question was about the pitch deck. A lot of startups fail to get investment due to problems with their pitch deck. Can you please tell us a little bit about what the right pitch is and what are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, so pitch deck is basically a document that you prepare to solicit investment into your company. And that's something that, there are different types of pitch decks. You generally have a one-pager that you send a lot more widely to just solicit interest from investors who have an interest in that space, that industry, that type of company, that stage of company. And then when you get a referral to an investor, or if you're reaching out cold to an investor and they show interest, then the next level is you share a bit more detail about the company, and that's generally contained in what's called a pitch deck. It's just a fancy word for a document that outlines, who you are, what your company is, what it does, what problem you're solving, how do you make money, what are the risks, what is it that you need, how do you plan to, capture customers, how do you plan to charge them, and how much money you're looking for, what kind of valuation you're looking for, and how do you plan to offer an exit to investors. So these are essentially the main elements of a good pitch deck. And there are tons of examples online. You just search Google for good examples of pitch decks, you'll find plenty of them. But the most important things are, the problem you're solving, the solution, how big the market is, how do you make money, what are some of the risks, what's the team, what's their background, and why is it that you will succeed, and how will you exit.
We only have 2 to 3 minutes remaining, and then the session will end. So I'm just going to skip a few questions. We have a question from the audience asked. It's by, you can see it yourself. It's by Muhammad Raza, and his question is that how much time is usually required to get investment after all the preparations and pitching is done? And he wants you to explain it in a layman language.
So I think I've already answered that. So typically, you want to give yourself, depending on what kind of capital you're looking for, what amount of capital you're looking for, and who you're raising money from, you want to give yourself months for angel type investments where individuals are going to write the checks for you, to all the way up to 4, 5, maybe sometimes 6 months from very large institutional investors like CDC, that take generally a longer time in conducting their due diligence and getting their approvals and stuff like that. It's really a range. Most of the time, at very early stage, you'll be looking for raising angel capital. So give yourself, 2 to 3 months at the very least.
So yeah, we've our time's up as well. So Mr. Khurram, thank you so much for being with us, and I'm so sorry about the connection issues. But it was great to listen to you and the insights that you had to share with us. We'll share the video with everybody. So whatever the issues that we faced today, but the internet will not be there in that, and we'll have a good session on the video as well. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and hope this session was insightful for you. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.